Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next iteration of a Rise 8 live stream. My name is Matt Nelson. I'm the COO of Rise 8 and a software acquisition superfan. And today we're going to be talking about the state of the union of the software acquisition pathway. And I'm super duper excited to introduce our guest panelists today. They are two of the most engaged thought leaders inside the defense innovation ecosystem. Currently, they are both at MITRE, where they are driving software acquisition strategy and implementation across the DoD. I'm going to introduce Pete Modigliani and Matt McGregor. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so before we get started into the nuts and bolts of how things are going inside the DoD software acquisition pathway, let's give the audience just a little bit of context of what is the DoD software acquisition pathway and what are its key stages?
Sure. So the software acquisition pathway is the newest pathway, a part of the adaptive acquisition framework. So we blew up the old 5,000 model into 6 dynamic processes, and Congress was really a forcing function for creating this pathway. We kept it simple. Instead of the many phases, many milestones, it's 2 phases: planning and execution. The vision is get through planning quickly, 6 months or less. No major milestones. So, decision authorities can have a review if they want, but you can proceed with the staff package. But in the planning phase, you firm up your high-level requirements, work through high-level elements of your acquisition, contracting, IP, the test strategies and the like. Do a cost estimate, get a agreement with the user community on the touch points between the requirements and acquisition community and how you're going to manage requirements. And then high level, your design, how you're going to leverage enterprise services and platforms and the like. But the key is you dive into the execution phase, get into development quickly. There's a bias towards getting that MVP demonstrated with the user community early to accelerate learning. And then the other unique aspect with the software pathway is we have an MVCR, minimum viable capability release. So that ties to more of the statutory requirement of once you start obligating funds towards your development contracts, you actually have to have something delivered within 12 months. And there's some nuances to that. But the key is, don't wait, years to get capability out the door. Go through the full processes of getting up and running and, ATO out the door, get it in the hands of users. And then it's continuous improvement throughout. Your strategies aren't going to be perfect from day one. You're going to evolve your designs, your requirements, working hand in hand with the user community, the key stakeholders throughout. And then it's a continuous improvement. And software is never done, as the DIB highlighted in their big swap study. So we kept it lightweight, dynamic, and purposely built to enable DevSecOps and agile software development. And that's the visual for you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really cool, to kind of see this policy that's about 2.5 years old now. It got published back in October of 2020. And it's revolutionary between, the old way of delivering software from a requirements-based, approach to this iterative learning model that you just walked through. So that's awesome. But how are things going? What is the current state of the DoD software acquisition pathway?
Yeah, so fundamentally, what we've seen is it's attractive enough that there's been a lot of growth. So we've seen a nice steady curve over the last couple of years, and now we're over 50 programs that are using it, and that's been across all the services, including SOCOM has been a major user of it. So I think for us, that's a sign of success. If SOCOM thinks this is aligned with the special operations speed, the tempo, and the focus on user centricity, I think that was a good sign to us that we're on the right path. And we see more, right? There's more coming through. So I think overall, when we look at the diversity of the types of capabilities that are using it, like I said, all the different services, we're seeing more embedded systems. So we have 2 subpaths on the pathway. There's the application and the embedded system. And we're seeing an increasing use for larger weapon systems that realize that software is going to be foundational to them. So overall, I think software pathway does not solve all of the technical and all of the people problems that are just natural to the acquisition system. But what we have seen is to be highly enabling, and like we said, it's the adoption is growing. So
that's great. Any success stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been a bunch with the early adopters. We're only a little over 2 years in, but we're already seeing some good success stories early on. As Matt highlighted, there's a wide range of large and small programs, and some of the bigger programs that may have struggled, via past acquisition models, they jumped into the software pathway and already seeing, a pivot towards more of a DevSecOps environment. So, a notable Air Force program has, very, prominent user agreement with their operational community. We've seen programs where they spent years kind of struggling in a planning and, never getting into development phase, pivot over, and we aggressively streamlined their timelines. Now they're in development and starting to, crank out code. One of the biggest things is a mindset shift, working closely with the user community, working closely with each of the functional areas, getting that 12-month or less, that iterative timeline. Obviously we want, weekly, drops, but, you got to, crawl, walk, run, to accelerate your timelines. But working with the key stakeholder communities, identifying the barriers, breaking them down. So we're seeing success at the, tactical program level, and then also at the headquarters level, slowly but surely, transforming some of the enterprise processes. Much more work needs to be done, but we're seeing, some significant movement early on.
That's awesome that we're starting to see that progress, from a policy that was just a dream at one point in time to actually in iteration. But, we can always learn from our mistakes. Any horror stories or things like that you'd like to kind of share that so we can learn from those mistakes and implementing the software acquisition pathway?
Yeah, I mean, the only other, I wouldn't say horror stories. Every program will have its challenges. All 50 have migrated from legacy acquisition processes, whether it's another part of the AF pathway or the old 5000 model. So many come with some of the legacy baggage, whether they're, requirements test organizations still want, well-defined upfront requirements, in a lengthy document and lock that down, or testers who want, long, DT and then OT timelines. Obviously, that runs counter to what, DevSecOps is trying to accomplish. So it's shaping that culture. Obviously, ATOs are always still going to be a challenge, but that's, universal to software development in the department. But, we have a whole slew of initiatives across OSD and the services to kind of, tackle some of them. Matt, I don't think anything else jumps out as a complete horror story, but most of the programs are moving the needle on software.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, right, providing when it comes to software, having more flexibility than traditional pathways had. You think about how a software program had to operate an MCA pathway with a acquisition program baseline and fixed requirements, and really sort of constrained them. So yeah, no horror stories other than we're now giving programs the ability to go make mistakes that they weren't even allowed to try to go make before. So the learning process is improving. So yes, there's always going to be some road bumps along the way when you're learning, but we've opened the aperture on that, I think, with some of these policies.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things with the pathway is that adoption from that waterfall mindset, to this adoption of the agile mindset of, continuous delivery and learning from your users. And that transition could be challenging with, folks making that transition. How are like the functionals inside the process handling that transition from waterfall to agile methodologies?
Yeah, I mean, Pete said it. It's a continuing evolution, right? We've seen great progress. We've seen the requirements community adopt a new type of requirements that has a faster approval timeline, more streamlined in its content. We've seen the test community, they're saying a lot of the right things. So there's a desire to kind of be part of that shift left approach, and recognizing that releases need to get out faster for the warfighter. They're hearing that demand signal, and but at the same time, the system has a bias for legacy processes, and so it's constantly a little bit back, but then we make some strides forward, and it gets a little bit back. So it's always a balancing act, and lots of progress there to continue to make. But I think we can say that we're moving in the right direction. Are we moving as fast as we might want? Well, probably not. But we've successfully, I think, gotten all the functionals to understand this new paradigm. Now it's about shifting those policies, and more importantly, shifting the practices, the day-to-day practices of those people that implement that, that they have that mindset, and that they're not falling back on some of the legacy approaches. So yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. I don't know what you'd have to say, Pete.
Yeah, it takes some time. So you can't just, give them a narrow brief and say, here's DevSecOps, and they go, oh, okay, I get it, and I know how to do things different. You have to hear it 2, 3, 4 times for it to really sink in, and then go, okay, how do I internalize it? How do I do, test, cost estimation, contracting requirements different in my environment? And then we partner across OSD, joint staff, the services, practitioners on the front lines, and say, let's work through the process. How can we do a more iterative approach that really bakes in the modern software development practices, leveraging commercial solutions, and then work through it. And as we, engage the early adopters, we want to hear from them on the front lines to say what's working, what's not, go tackle the systemic issues, and continuously improve it. But it's still a process for the big DoD bureaucracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's going to be a generational change, but one of those things that is truly going to enable, in my opinion, that day-to-day practice is this notion of continuous delivery. Because when you get into that continuous delivery mindset, you get those faster feedback loops. You can involve people more actively because you're getting feedback on a continuous basis. So how is that that user-centered design at the end user level approach working for the software acquisition pathway, and making sure continuous delivery is part of that basically tactic to get that end user feedback?
Yeah, so I'll start, Matt. We have a user agreement, so we have a formal arrangement between the requirements and acquisition community to commit actual end users, people who are going to be using the software on a regular basis, to work with the development team, share their insights in the operational environment, provide rapid feedback. So that's critically important. That we can't just write requirements, throw it over the wall to acquisition, and then years later throw some software back over and everyone's disappointed. So having those regular engagements is invaluable for the software pathway. For the continuous delivery, obviously there's the long, full range of stuff, particularly ATOs, that very few programs are able to have the, robust DevSecOps pipeline where, they can continuously deliver that software. So there's still work to be done in that space, but definitely increased touch points with the user community.
Yeah, I want to just add, the feedback that I continually get is that the user agreement has been a game changer. And I'd say the user agreement in conjunction with the value assessment, because I think, Pete and I were both program managers, and we always said we were trying to engage with the users, right? We invited them to design reviews and different things. But we didn't always give them a chance to kind of give open feedback, and to kind of just lay everything on the table, right? It was always in the context of some specific meeting or something like that. And so I think sometimes we felt we were engaging the users, like, well, we engaged them, we had them there. But it's really, this has been pretty different. And I think this is the real paradigm shift, is having those, kind of from a product management mindset, right? But having those sit down sessions where you're literally walking through like what the software looks like. And I've sat in a bunch of them now, and it is amazing because you just hear these airmen, you have tech sergeants and, senior NCOs, and they all have a slightly different perspective on what the problem is. And so the developers are sitting there and they're getting all this feedback. This is just amazing, very precise feedback. And then at the broader level with the value assessment, you're getting that more strategic feedback from the operational sponsor, right? The people that are usually funding this and writing the higher level requirements. And so you get that tactical perspective of like, here's what I don't like about having to use this and hands-on, but you get that larger perspective of here's collectively the capabilities you're providing. And that's where the value assessment, I think, in conjunction with user agreement has been really valuable, because sometimes you might be delivering a ton of stuff. You're like churning out a bunch of stuff, but that higher level user is like, I am not seeing an increase in my capability to affect a warfighting effect, or create an effect, or do the operations that I need to do at the speed I need to. And so being able to connect those two dots with those two, not that those artifacts solve everything, but it gets the program thinking, and it gets the users in a more formal engagement kind of process. So anyway, I think those are some of the big pictures.
Yeah, I can still recall back in my acquisition days, I wasn't allowed to talk to the end user. I could talk to the MAGCOM, and the MAGCOM would represent the end user, but they were the ones who talked to the end user and gathered the requirements. And then we'd have these requirements working groups, and that would be user-centered design. So I love that user agreement piece and the value assessment piece. But, one other key aspect to the pathway is the capability needs statement. How are current programs doing with drafting those? Because, you follow the Agile Manifesto, and it's, you want collaboration over, documentation, but you still got to find that right balance. What is the lead time for those user agreements, capability need statements, and how is that coming along?
Yeah, so for the lead time, it varies widely. I mean, some of the early adopters, were spending months and months on some of these documents, and we gave them the feedback of, you should be able to knock this out in 2 or 3 days for sitting down, getting the key stakeholders in a room and knocking it out. For the requirements, we baked into the software pathway a high-level capability need statement. So this isn't the big ICD, CDD. It's high level. What do you need the software to do? Kept it constrained, 10 pages or less. Hit some key elements. But the philosophy is then, you're not locking it down forever. That's the umbrella to set the stage. You'll build, product roadmaps, and then backlogs that have the more tactical, more dynamic sets of capability needs that you work with a product owner, with the end users, with engineers and other key stakeholders, to then iterate on what's going to go in the next release. Much more dynamic involvement. You'll update it based on test results, based on user feedback, based on shifting threats and technologies and priorities. So it's a different mindset from managing requirements than putting it all in a document, locking it down, and then measuring you against some strict baseline.
Yeah, and then just kind of wanting to talk about just the cultural challenges that are arriving with this implementation of the pathway. Acquisitions getting more involved in the requirements process, and tests coming in way earlier, and cybersecurity coming in way earlier, and all of those different roles and different cultural norms that have to change. Like, have you run into any challenges with that implementation, or really smart ways to kind of navigate that?
One of the challenges, I think, is it's interesting because I don't think at the program level, apart from adopting some of these processes, I think the programs overall get it. The struggle is always how to get to that end state that you want to get to. Like, a lot of them, have a sense of Agile. They've taken some classes. We've had roadshows with them. But the fundamental thing is sort of that they have to kind of get to the place that they want to get to by maturing their own processes, and that can take some time. But the piece that kind of is probably the biggest shift is that, like, leadership and some of the higher level, the headquarters, still have there's still a tendency to want to think about software the way that we've always managed programs, call schedule performance, a kind of fixed IMS kind of approach. So one of the cultural shifts that we're still struggling with a little bit is how to convey progress in a digital, when you're talking about a digital artifact. And this is going to be challenging with AI, right? As AI comes on, like, how do you know, how are you progressing, on your AI project? And it's like, being able to articulate, well, we ingested this new type of data and we did this type of learning. On the software side, it's been equally challenging because you're delivering things, but you don't have a fixed IMS where you're like, we're 25% done, now with our thing, or we've had a CDR, so we're halfway through EMD, or there's not these fixed milestones. So getting more creative about how we communicate with our stakeholders, how roadmaps are used to communicate, is one of those kind of, I think, organizational cultural challenges. Apart from all the functional stuff, right? Just continuing to kind of make progress with all the different functionals. I don't know what you'd say, Pete.
Yeah, and I'll just add great points. It still goes back to the training and the experience of, how many acquisition professionals have really done, software development from a product development perspective. You can't just take a 2-day course and now you're a certified trained warrior. It's going through, getting broader, deeper experience, deeper training, with your team, not only the acquisition team, but with the contractor team. So you're on the same page. You have those discussions on how you're going to tailor the environment unique to your program. Obviously getting the users involved with all this to help them understand the mindset. And then with each of the functional partners that you have, fold them into this environment to then say, here's how we're going to tailor, the unique aspects of our development environment for what we're trying to accomplish. So as more and more programs, do this, they'll gain more experience and they can spread to other programs. But still in the early stages, we need to do a better job of leveraging, commercial talent to bring them into the mix from a, government side so that they understand the nuances of this, as well as bring in coaches. So just advise, the key players along the way on the new roles, the new environment, the new processes. They have a better understanding how to navigate this new environment.
Yeah, and I'd like to follow up on that training comment that you just made. So, one of the things that I saw is, the policy came out, but the training piece of how to train somebody that is traditionally, brought up in an industrial era type of practice with DoD 5000.2, and give them a different direction to say, now you're going to be a software leader instead of a product leader or, material leader. And there's different best practices, like different goals that you're trying to achieve when you're doing product versus programs. How is that coming along across the DoD? What would you grade our training scale for, software leadership across the enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. So we know, DAU and some of the traditional schoolhouses are modernizing their software training curriculum. There are plenty of outside courses that you can take, more, short workshops, spend a week or a few weeks with hands-on working with development teams and actually, going through. And it's not only just the practitioners, those in a program office, but it's, the leadership chain, the functional community, tailoring it for each of their environments. So, they have a deeper understanding. But the more you can get them hands-on, practical experience with it is going to be invaluable. But we're still a long ways away from getting that digital workforce the department needs. But it's so critical to everything we do. Much more is needed to invest in that.
Yeah, and the one thing that I find very encouraging is, DAU is doing some updates. So they're updating their curriculum. There's an Agile certification, and I think there's going to be more. There's going to be some commercial education that's injected into that. But the one thing that really encourages me is the generation that's coming into the workforce I think has a natural product management bent, and I think us old guys who came up through the system, I think for those folks it's been a little bit of a harder shift to that kind of mindset and not thinking about a program and like I'm the program manager and so I need to do this, get these requirements burned down and get this out, and more about the different product and the fact that there might be different products and different user sets you have to think about it, and just recreating or shifting that kind of thinking. But I feel like the generation that's coming into the acquisition workforce it's much more intuitive to them. So I find that very promising, and so we can really build on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so we've kind of talked about training, we've talked about the requirements, we've talked about the culture, but there's still probably a couple bottlenecks in that software delivery value stream. And two that I'm seeing are the cybersecurity accreditation process that we've touched on, and then DT and OT. And bringing those into the development cycles as early as possible, so you're not bolting them on at the end, is kind of like what the software acquisition pathway is all about. How are you seeing those two specific, I'm going to give them just steps in the value stream? How are those challenges being overcome inside the software acquisition pathway today?
So there's been some good progress to involve the testers early. There's a whole shift left of get them involved up front to shape the strategy, shape the mindset. How do we maximize automation throughout? Integrate DT and OT. And then obviously cybersecurity. There's still the long labyrinth of dozens and dozens of policies and countless certifications that you have to get through. So there's still a big challenge to get through all that. We're trying to help spell it all out as best we can early, to then provide the guidance to the workforce so that they have a better understanding of how to navigate it. There's been partnerships across the test community at the OSD and service level to evolve some of the mindset. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but in addition to shift left, it's also shift right, of even after you're deploying the code, to continually test it, to check for vulnerabilities. The more we can have that, those common platforms and enterprise services that you're already baking in some cybersecurity up front, that programs can then leverage existing services so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It improves interoperability, cost, a number of other factors, but and then just keeping up with the pace of change of all the technology out there. So it's a huge challenge, but making some good progress.
Yeah, the one thing that I think has started to permeate the department is there's a little bit more appreciation for the risk is not always on making sure that there is no vulnerability, everything is perfect, and that it's worth doing a 6-month operational test on every single release, but getting more nuanced about it, and the fact that operational warfighters are saying, I want this capability, and they're willing to take more risks. Not that you want to deploy something risky, but they're willing to say, like, okay, we've gone through these testing, and for this release, the capability that's being provided, we understand it. So maybe we can trust that the automation, the tool chain that was used to do a lot of the automated testing and run through, the vulnerability assessments and different things, maybe that's good enough for this release, right? So it's partially moving to that place where like risk is not just security, but it's also speed, and you have to balance those, and you have to have that nuanced appreciation for what's actually in that release. And so make that collaborative decision with the operational community, the test community, and the program office to say, how do we handle this? It's not just a cookie cutter approach. So I think there is progress there. CIO is engaged. So this is not just software pathway, right? Everyone's kind of impacted by this. And so I think there is a lot of movement in that direction, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, and just on the outside looking in there, like, coming from Kessel Run and the power that a continuous ATO had of establishing that continuous delivery and really eliminating that bottleneck of, being able to get that feedback, because you're not waiting, 300 days for cybersecurity accreditation, and seeing a lot of those other continuous ATO accreditations materializing. Is that something that the software acquisition pathway, like, will promote or maybe evolve into to like improve and continuously like enhance the policy to make sure that best practices like that are highly encouraged?
I believe so. Yeah, through all of it, I mean, the pathways are going to be, perfect right out of the gate. So it's always a continuous improvement. And with all of the other enterprise processes, it's the active partnerships with the CIOs, with the test community, to then work through, get them to understand how do we do things better. But our main focus with the pathway is how do you enable the program success? So it's been a huge shift from, legacy policies of here's the policy, here's the 1,001 things you got to do. And, we're going to have heavy oversight with the checklist to make sure you've done everything. It's really about enabling, advising the programs, partnering with them to think through novel strategies, fostering collaboration across the services and agencies. Hey, Program X over here, did it well. We'll connect you directly with them to help sort through your issues. Or if a program's having an issue with some of their service headquarters staff with some legacy thinking, we'll call it, we'll engage where we can to then, help advise them on either, strategies to navigate this, to address, their critical needs. But again, it goes back to Matt's point of balancing the speed with rigor. Hugely important that, we can spend another year and polish and perfect, that software and check it 6 times over. But, speed has its own quality of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Speed is the new security, as they say, right? So one way to, reduce your vulnerabilities is to fix them and patch them really quickly after you identify them. I was on programs where we'd have to write a letter to say that, there was no security impact to this software patch that was fixing the security thing that we were trying to fix in the first place. So, and no one's going to read that memo after it's signed. So it's great that, we're starting this. I would call it more of a evolutionary mind shift, and the policy is one of those key enablers to start with this evolutionary shift versus just a revolutionary next day where we're going to be, completely, continuous ATO and continuous delivery with every single program, because we do have a lot of legacy out there. And it kind of, okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say one thing is worth mentioning too is like this actually does have the DepSecDef's attention. So there is a software modernization implementation plan that has a lot of these core things you just mentioned, Matt. A lot of those listed out as things the department needs to address. So one thing I would look at is for the department over the next 12, 18 months as they're addressing those things and reporting back to the department leadership is, that will be something to grade us against, I think, because it is those things are recognized, and so now it's on the collective leadership and all of us, not just the software pathway, but all of us to kind of make it happen. But it's actually been documented, and there's a plan to kind of address it. So
yeah, absolutely, and I'd love to see those kind of conversations happen in those value assessments, right? So having the conversations of how well oiled your IT is, and then also having the conversation of like, what is that, operational outcome that you're pushing towards with your software? Because at the end of the day, if you don't get, your software in the hands of the user and it improves a warfighter outcome, you're just building prototypes that are in a lab. And that's the beauty, I think, of the software acquisition pathway. But we're about, 10 minutes left here in the conversation. And I'm hoping we can get some, audience participation here and get some questions. I do see one from Paul Puckett here. I'll start with that one. It says, what incentive structures still exist in legacy PEO structures that do not promote the use of SWAP? And what do we need to do to change them?
Well, one thing I'll throw out is that I've heard is sometimes Pete and I get the question. We do a lot of roadshows and talks. It's sort of like, how is this going to benefit me, right? So we kind of get this like, some POs that are seeing it for the first time, or just leaders or PMs that are seeing it for the first time. How will this help me? And, there's a lot of attraction to the fact that like the JSIDS process might be a little more streamlined, and that there might be, you're not subject to some of the 5002 stuff. You can tailor a little bit more easily. And that is attractive. But I think it's fundamentally the incentives are showing them that you have more of a clean sheet. You can go and see what are the needs of your program, implement the right processes, build the team that you think you need, right? So we're going to start seeing AI become more embedded in almost probably every software program. So it's sort of like thinking through, like, do I need data engineers? Do I need AI ML engineers? Do I need these types of product people who are have product owner specialties? You're able to sort of think about your program holistically and what you need, and then you have more a little bit more flexibility, I'd say, on the contracting front, because there's some proven practices, and Kessel Run was part of proving some of these that are a little bit easier to implement when you have a pathway with flexibility, and that doesn't have the strictures that constrain you, but allow you to do what's smart for the program. So I think that's sort of fundamental, is like the incentive is, I think, to convey that message. Like, this is giving you an opportunity to not take a checklist and go through it, but to go and develop and craft the program or portfolio of programs that will provide the capability in the end. So I don't know. Is the incentive there for? Is there money? Is there fame? No. But I think once they get that message of like, you can be more effective, and actually you can spend your time in the most value-added way. So you're not doing a lot of the bureaucratic stuff that's just consuming like memos that aren't going to go anywhere, that no one's going to read, but actually focusing on making sure the program is operating effectively. So I think that the incentive is there naturally, and
and Matt and I have been working with many programs over the last 20 years, and programs we've touched 20 years ago that says, oh yeah, here's our roadmap, here's what we're gonna get it all done within 5 years, and 20 years later we still see them slugging along with not fully achieving everything that were intended to do, and like, you're still at this, really? So if you're in one of the legacy pathways, the old 5000 or an MCA, hey, if you're far enough in development, things are going well, keep on trucking. But if, most programs are often, struggling, the users are very unsatisfied, it's overrunning cost, long schedules to deliver any meaningful capability, long, mean time to repair, that, we say, consider, moving to the software pathway. It's not a paperwork exercise to do that transition. But you could spend some time to pivot and rethink and say, where can we operate with a more greater agile and DevSecOps environment? Where can we shift our mindset, our culture, our strategies, maybe even our vendor, and operate with a new model? So it definitely, the 50 plus programs that have shifted, there's been very positive feedback and navigating. So it's I think more and more programs are going to shift over the next few years.
Yeah, I like that. And as soon as we hear more success stories, the change agents that jumped in on the clean sheet, well, then the laggards will come behind them and jump in on that clean sheet and really, hopefully, like, learn from the trail that's already been blazed. But Tanya Lambert had a great question here around cost estimates and how we're validating them rather than using source lines of code. So love to kind of get your thoughts on one of, I think, biggest cultural barriers in this is around cost estimation, because it's still a requirement in the planning phase of SWaP. So what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, this has been a big area for us. One of the big areas, right, along with all the other functionals. But I have to give a lot of props to CAPE here. We've had a lot of discussions, and it's actually been a cross-service collaboration, with CAPE. And the recognition was immediate. It was very encouraging to me sitting in those discussions where, immediately cost estimators would kind of acknowledge, like, yeah, we can't do things the old way. Like, we recognize, like, we need to rethink how we're doing this. And so there's still a lot of learning and education and improving that. And part of it is moving away from a reliance on all of the legacy data that we used to do, right? Like, let's look at a prior program and find an analog, that cost about $20 million. This should cost $20 million. And moving more towards, okay, what are the near-term requirements? Pete and I spent a lot of time kind of pushing the message of, like, don't develop a 20-year roadmap, but do have a year roadmap of the things you're going to get after. And so It's more about what's the complexity of those features that I'm going to have to get after. How many teams am I likely going to need to pursue that? And so you have that initial sort of understanding up front, and then you learn throughout, right? Like maybe you thought 5 teams to get after this block of work that you kind of agreed with the user on was enough. You find like, no, our productivity isn't there. The team has more maturing to do. We actually need 6, 7 teams. We need some different skill sets. Maybe we need some better tools, and you start to learn. And so a big piece of the cost estimating reform, and there are going to be some updates coming in the near future, I hope, is going to be around like those cost estimators understanding the program and being as close to the program as possible, so that they can help the program inform and help them advocate for more resources. As they understand the nuances of the program and what's maybe driving the cost, maybe what's as improvements are made, we can say, well, we can actually do more, right? So it's a collaboration with the engineering team too, to be like, we're actually getting better. Our metrics are showing us, we're generating code faster, we're generating less errors, we're seeing, integration happen faster, and we're getting better with our testing suites. And so we can actually do more. Like we should, do more with the teams we have. Maybe we're underestimating. So we'd love to get to that place, right, where we're underestimating the work. Like, wow, we could do more work than we thought we could do. So, yeah, that's where it's at. I think it's very encouraging that at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And I think cost estimators leverage cost models. So I'd love to see what is the new cost model in this new world, right? Like you just mentioned, faster lead time. So maybe it's a model of like, what is the cost per outcome? And as you establish continuous delivery faster, you're going to lower your cost per outcome because you're going to be, much quicker, versus right now we have a cost model of like, we have historical data of thousands of different programs that says it costs this much to build 10,000 lines of code. So hopefully one of these days we'll have a whole conversation around different cost models that are tailor-made for DevSecOps processes and DORA metrics and all of those things. So yeah, I think we have about time for hopefully 2 more questions. So next one's from Christina Biggs here. Is what's the balance between reduced workforce and making sure adequate troubleshooting has been performed by an accountable worker rather than AI?
Well, obviously we have a constrained government workforce or organic workforce, and how much are actually doing the coding versus, bringing in development teams as contractors. So, it's the balance of, developing the new code versus, the fixes and burning down your technical debt. It's always an ongoing challenge. I don't know, Matt, anything on your end?
Well, I think part of it is taking advantage of all the tools, right? The commercial sector has gotten a lot smarter. I mean, if people have been paying attention with, GPT and Auto GPT, and I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that I think we're going to have to adapt to in the future. And so, as we maybe have a reduced workforce, if we do see a decline, taking max advantage of all of those tools so that we can maximize the workforce we have, maximize less about the workforce and more about maximize our resources, right? Because we're gonna have a lot of priorities. You look at IndoPACOM, a lot of things they want, so we are going to have to make every dollar count. And I think we do that most effectively by leveraging every commercial resource that's available and pulling that into the department and assimilating it. So yeah, that's what I'd say to Christina there. I think is less about accountability and more just making use of what's available.
Yeah, leverage automation when you can, and that way you can leverage the brains for the people that are working on this thing, so you can be more efficient. So I love that approach. But we're right at time. Pete, Matt, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this great conversation. And is there anything that you would like to plug here at the end for what work you're doing and anything like that?
The software pathway was uniquely designed for to be the default approach for doing software development within DoD. So check out the website aaf.dau.edu. There's the link. Plenty of guidance and resources always welcome feedback. You won't want to hear best practices, lessons learned, any updates, but we want to continuously improve with the programs on the front lines and help work through these issues.
Yeah, no, that's it. Thanks, Matt.
No, thank you. Yeah, and just a plug here for Rise 8, we do have Prodacity coming out in 2023. So if you enjoyed this conversation, there's going to be a whole lot more of these types of conversations, not on the policy side, but also on the technology side, but the process side, when it comes to all the processes that really make software delivery effective. So check us out, rise8.us. Sign up for Prodacity 2023 on November 7th and 8th, and love to see you there. And have a great day, everybody. Really enjoyed it. Have a good one.